A sarcastic laugh echoed through the quiet courtroom. Prosecutor Bradley Sanderson, his gaze filled with contempt, stared intently at the black woman sitting quietly in the back row. What he didn't know was that in just a few minutes, his arrogance would be crushed by an unexpected truth. This woman, Leona Carter, was not just an ordinary spectator. She was a covert agent with the U.S. Secret Service, and her presence in this trial was no accident. This was not just a routine court session. It was a battle between truth and lies, between justice and power. What would happen when Leona Carter's true identity was revealed? Would the truth come to light, or would justice be buried under the weight of power? And when her true identity is exposed, the courtroom will be stunned, and Bradley Sanderson's career will be turned upside down. Follow this thrilling story where a mocking laugh will soon turn into a chilling cry. Don't miss the upcoming twists. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single moment. The old ceiling fan hummed loudly, its rusted blades spinning sluggishly, struggling to push away the oppressive summer heat of Washington, but it was in vain. The air hung thick, suffocating the room like a heavy velvet curtain. The rustle of paper, the occasional cough, and hurried footsteps on the cold marble floor merged into a chaotic symphony, signaling that the trial ahead would be anything but ordinary. Outside, the bright sunlight blazed through the large glass windows, casting brilliant golden rays into the courtroom. Yet strangely, the light failed to dispel the darkness that had taken over. Instead, it created a cruel contrast, exposing the gloom and chill of the room. The sun's beams pierced through the fine dust particles, creating misty streaks of light that looked like cold, sharp blades slicing through the tense atmosphere. Courtroom 9C at the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse wasn't unfamiliar with high-profile cases, but today it bore an unsettling stillness, a chilling calm before the storm. Every eye was fixed on the defendant, Marcus Allen, a seemingly ordinary IT engineer with a gaunt face and dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. There he sat, alone and helpless, like a lost bird in the midst of a pack of wolves. Marcus's case wasn't one of violent murder or a high-profile corruption scandal, but it was something far more insidious, a quiet crime with far-reaching consequences, cybercrime. Marcus was accused of illegally accessing the servers of a defense contractor, stealing classified information that could severely jeopardize national security. And as the bell rang, signaling the start of the trial, an eerie silence enveloped the room. Everyone in that space knew that what would unfold here wouldn't just determine Marcus Allen's fate, but would also unveil the dark secrets lurking deep within the heart of Washington, D.C. In the suffocating air of Courtroom 9C, Marcus Allen sat huddled in his defendant's chair, a pale shadow against the cold stone walls. His face was gaunt and ashen, with veins standing out beneath his thin skin. Dark circles marked his eyes, exhausted from sleepless nights. His gaze was unfocused, sometimes staring blankly ahead, other times drifting down to his trembling hands. Marcus was no seasoned criminal. He was just an ordinary IT engineer, a husband, a father, now thrust into the whirlwind of a serious case. The gray suit he wore seemed too large for his frail frame, like armor too heavy to shield him from the scrutinizing stares and the accusations pointing at him from all sides. Beside Marcus, Rachel Goldberg, his defense attorney, sat upright, trying to maintain composure, but the tension was evident on her youthful face. Rachel was a new lawyer, and this case was a monumental challenge for her. She knew that if she failed, it wouldn't just tarnish her career, it could destroy Marcus's life. Her hands gripped the file tightly, her fingers pale from the pressure. Her sharp eyes skimmed through the pages of evidence, desperately searching for a glimmer of hope, a flaw in the prosecution's arguments. Across from Rachel, Bradley Sanderson, the prosecutor, sat relaxed in his chair, his face brimming with confidence. A seasoned prosecutor with a reputation for victory, Bradley saw Marcus's case as a mere stepping stone, easy prey to further his career. His sleek black suit and bright red tie exuded power and arrogance. His eyes were cold and calculating as they swept over Marcus and Rachel, as though studying a weak animal trapped in a cage. In the audience, Leona Carter sat quietly, separate from the crowd, a black woman in her early 30s. Her appearance was unremarkable, nothing to draw attention to her. but her eyes were sharp, observant, as though she were trying to absorb every detail in the courtroom. She showed no signs of anxiety or fear. She simply watched, analyzed. Her dark suit and crisp white blouse gave off an air of professionalism and mystery. Leona Carter's presence created a stark contrast to the tense and suffocating atmosphere in the courtroom. She seemed like an outsider, a silent observer, yet there was an unsettling aura about her, as if she were holding a secret, one that could completely alter the course of the case. Bradley Sanderson rose to his feet, adjusting the lapels of his suit, a mocking smile flickering across his lips. He looked at Marcus Allen as if he were a trapped animal, a failure unworthy of concern. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," his voice rang out, echoing through the quiet courtroom. "We are not here to discuss the innocence or guilt of an ordinary man. We are here to protect national security, to defend the values we hold dear." Bradley's words were not just accusations. They were an insult, a complete denial of Marcus's humanity. He deliberately demeaned Marcus, transforming him into someone unworthy of respect, a person whom anyone could easily doubt. Bradley's excessive confidence, his arrogance bordering on cruelty, thickened the air in the courtroom, making it feel even more suffocating. Rachel Goldberg, Marcus's defense attorney, clenched the case file tightly in her hands, trying to suppress the growing anger inside her. She glanced at Marcus, sitting huddled on the defendant's chair, his gaunt face pale, his gaze vacant. She knew that if she couldn't prove Marcus's innocence, he would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Leona Carter sat in silence, observing everything, but her silence was far from benign. Her sharp gaze seemed to scan every corner of the courtroom, searching for hidden details. She gave no outward sign of surprise or fear at Bradley's accusations, merely observing, evaluating. Occasionally, she would furrow her brow as if contemplating something deeper, something only she knew. Leona's presence created a stark contrast to the tense and stifling atmosphere. She appeared as an outsider, a quiet observer, yet her presence carried an unsettling aura, as if she were holding a secret that could entirely change the course of the case. Leona Carter's actions made people uneasy, as though she was hiding a secret, one that could completely alter the dynamics of the trial. Her mere presence, her silence, all created a sense of suspicion, a curiosity that was impossible to ignore. And then a thought suddenly flickered in everyone's mind. Was Marcus Allen truly a traitor or just a pawn in a much larger conspiracy? Was there some truth being concealed, a truth that only Leona Carter knew? Those questions lingered, creating an atmosphere charged with tension and doubt. No one knew that what would unfold next would not only determine Marcus Allen's fate, but also reveal the dark secrets hidden deep within the heart of Washington, D.C. And when the truth was finally exposed, no one could have predicted that it would change everything. The courtroom grew more suffocating as the prosecution delved deeper into their case. Each witness stepping up with precision, delivering their testimony with the chilling confidence of a well-rehearsed performance. One after another, the witnesses wove a web of accusations around Marcus Allen, painting him as a master manipulator, a man who had used his access and knowledge to breach national security, a man who had orchestrated an act of treason against his country. The first witness was a senior manager from the defense contractor, a man whose voice trembled slightly, but whose words were carefully crafted. He described the company's state-of-the-art security systems in excruciating detail: the layers of firewalls, the encrypted channels, the rigorous access controls. His testimony was meticulous, painting an image of a nearly impenetrable fortress. He emphasized the severity of the breach, stating that only a handful of individuals had been granted the highest level of access to classified information, and among those trusted few, Marcus Allen was named. "As you can see," he said, pointing to a projected screen displaying logs, "this is a record of every time Mr. Allen accessed the system. These timestamps are critical. He accessed the servers on several occasions during odd hours, hours that no legitimate employee should be working, let alone accessing sensitive information. There is no possible reason for him to have been online at these times unless he had malicious intent." The tension in the room was palpable as the manager's words hung in the air, leaving no room for doubt. The evidence seemed so clear, so undeniable. But beneath that clarity, A growing unease simmered. The connection between Marcus Allen and the breach was laid out with such perfection, it almost seemed too convenient. The pieces fit together so well, it felt more like a calculated setup than the messy truth of a man in distress. The second witness was a cybersecurity expert, a man with a reputation that had earned him respect in the highest circles. His appearance, confident and professional, only added to the weight of his testimony. He launched into a technical analysis of the breach, explaining in intricate detail how Marcus had allegedly bypassed the security measures. He showed complex network diagrams and strings of code that flew over the heads of most in the room, but the expert's assurance made it seem irrefutable. "These traces," he said, pointing to the screen, "are the hallmark of an advanced intrusion. The sophistication of this attack could only have been carried out by someone with specialized knowledge, someone with years of experience. Only someone like Marcus Allen." With every word he spoke, the case against Marcus seemed to tighten like a noose slowly constricting around him. The evidence was damning, but still, something didn't sit right. The expert's certainty, the expert's unshakable confidence, it felt rehearsed. It was as if the prosecution had tailored every testimony to their narrative, leaving no room for Marcus to defend himself. Then the final witness, a former colleague of Marcus, a man who had worked alongside him for years, took the stand. This man had been one of Marcus's closest allies in the company, and his testimony was supposed to seal Marcus's fate. But when he began speaking, there was a strange hesitation in his voice. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it didn't go unnoticed. "I saw Marcus," he began, his eyes darting nervously. "I saw him accessing the system at around 2 a.m., but I wasn't sure what he was doing. I didn't question it at the time. It didn't seem out of place." His voice trailed off as he shifted uneasily in his chair. The courtroom had grown quiet, the tension thick in the air. Rachel Goldberg, Marcus's defense attorney, was watching him intently. Her mind was working overtime, trying to piece together the contradictions in his statement, the unease in his eyes. This wasn't the testimony she had expected. It was too vague, too uncertain. And then came the bombshell. A second witness contradicted the first. A completely different person, someone who had worked in a different department, but who had been aware of Marcus's movements, testified that Marcus had been attending an important meeting at exactly the same time the first witness claimed to have seen him accessing the servers. "I was there. I saw him," the second witness said firmly. "He was in the conference room with me and several other senior managers. We were discussing the quarterly reports. It was impossible for him to have been accessing the system at that time." The contradiction hung in the air, its implications impossible to ignore. Two witnesses, two conflicting accounts, both claiming to know exactly what Marcus had been doing at the same time. The room was charged with an unsettling tension. Could both witnesses be telling the truth? Or had something more sinister been at play? The contradictions didn't stop there. Another small detail came to light, a report that had supposedly been tampered with, yet it didn't appear to fit the timeline of the breach. The more the defense dug into the evidence, the more they realized that these perfect testimonies were beginning to unravel. They were too neatly aligned, too synchronized, too precise to be real. Rachel could feel it. The case against Marcus was falling apart. The prosecution had constructed a flawless case, but underneath that surface, there were cracks, fractures that hinted at something much darker. Something was wrong, and it was becoming clearer by the second. As the testimonies continued, the air in the courtroom seemed to grow heavier. The tension was palpable, and for the first time, a sense of unease began to spread among the jury. What was really happening here? Was Marcus truly guilty, or was he being set up? Were these perfect testimonies just pieces of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that once solved, would reveal a shocking truth? The room held its breath. The storm was coming, and no one knew when or how it would hit. But the undercurrent of suspicion was undeniable. The only thing that was certain was this: everything was about to change. The prosecution's damning testimonies reverberated through the courtroom, striking Rachel Goldberg like a series of cold, sharp blades. Each one cut deeper into her resolve. She felt herself being submerged by a violent wave, with no way to resurface. Rachel tried to fight back, presenting sharp counterarguments, but it all seemed futile. Bradley Sanderson, with his seasoned experience and razor-sharp rhetorical skills, easily overpowered her. Every time Rachel attempted to challenge his points, Bradley countered swiftly with airtight arguments and incisive questions, leaving her scrambling for a response. "You're trying to mislead the jury with vague, ambiguous arguments," Bradley said, his voice cold and dripping with sarcasm. "The truth is, Marcus Allen abused his position to steal national secrets. There's no denying that." Rachel felt herself being backed into a corner, isolated and powerless. She glanced at Marcus Allen, huddled in the defendant's chair, his gaunt face and desperate eyes piercing her. She knew that if she couldn't prove his innocence, Marcus would be destroyed. But she also knew she was up against a powerful opponent, one who would stop at nothing to win, a man who would use any means necessary to achieve his goal. Her sense of helplessness didn't only stem from Bradley's overwhelming dominance. It was also the isolation she felt in the courtroom. She stood alone against the might of the system, the eyes of the jury, the hushed whispers, the subtle looks of judgment. They all created an invisible pressure weighing down on her. Rachel felt as though she were trapped in a whirlpool, unable to escape. She fought to keep her composure, but the loneliness and helplessness slowly eroded her spirit. It was as if she had been abandoned, left to fend for herself with no one offering support. But Rachel was not the kind of person to give up easily. She knew she was Marcus's only hope, the only one who could shield him from these false accusations. She gripped the case file tightly in her hands, took a deep breath, and tried to regain her focus. She knew she had to keep fighting, no matter how isolated or powerless she felt. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Rachel's voice trembled, but it was filled with unwavering determination. "We cannot convict a man based solely on flimsy evidence and staged testimonies. We need the truth, and I will not rest until it is exposed." Her words echoed through the courtroom like a declaration of defiance, a promise to never surrender. She knew the battle ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she was not alone. The truth was on her side, and she would never give up on it. While Rachel Goldberg struggled to defend Marcus Allen against Bradley Sanderson's sharp attacks, Leona Carter remained a calm and composed presence in the courtroom, unaffected by the escalating tension around her. She sat quietly, like a stone statue, but her keen eyes never stopped absorbing every minute detail that unfolded before her. Leona wasn't just observing the witness testimonies. She was watching every nuance of the people in the room. She studied Bradley Sanderson, noting every gesture, every word, every arrogant smirk that played on his lips. She watched Rachel Goldberg, recognizing the anxiety, the sense of powerlessness, yet also acknowledging the unwavering determination and resolve in her eyes. And then she turned her attention to Marcus Allen, memorizing his fear, his desperation, but also noting the injustice and fury simmering just beneath the surface of his weary exterior. Leona wasn't just observing with her eyes. She was also observing with her heart. She could feel the injustice, the worry, and the tension that filled the courtroom. She sensed Marcus Allen's sense of wrong, Rachel Goldberg's solitude, and the falsehoods woven into the testimonies being presented by the prosecution. Occasionally, Leona would furrow her brow as if contemplating something profound, something only she could comprehend. There were moments when her expression shifted, a subtle sign of doubt, as though she was uncovering discrepancies, contradictions hidden within the carefully orchestrated testimonies. Leona Carter's presence brought an air of mystery that no one could ignore. Who was she? Why was she here? What role did she play in this case? These questions lingered in the minds of everyone in the courtroom, creating an atmosphere of curiosity and perhaps even unease. Then a thought flickered in the minds of those present. Was Leona Carter an enigmatic witness, someone who could change the entire course of the trial? Did she hold a secret, one that could reveal the truth behind the fabricated testimonies? No one knew that what was about to unfold would not only determine Marcus Allen's fate, but would also expose the dark secrets buried deep within Washington, D.C. And when the truth finally emerged, no one could have anticipated how it would change everything. When Rachel Goldberg called Leona Carter to the stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every eye turned toward the mysterious woman who had remained quietly observing since the trial began. Leona's sudden appearance at the witness stand marked an unexpected turning point, breaking the deadlock Rachel had been struggling against. Leona Carter stepped up to the stand, her face calm and composed, showing no sign of being unsettled by the scrutinizing gazes directed at her. She placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Her voice rang out through the quiet courtroom, clear and resolute, like a definitive declaration. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Leona began. I am a data analyst, and I have spent considerable time reviewing the evidence presented in this case. And I believe there are significant irregularities in that evidence. Leona began to present sharp technical analyses, presenting intricate network diagrams and complex lines of code. But unlike the prosecution's expert, Leona didn't aim to confuse the jury. She explained everything clearly, making it accessible, as though she were teaching a class of students. Look at these system logs, Leona said, pointing to a large screen displaying lines of code. According to the testimony of the prosecution's expert, these logs show that Marcus Allen accessed the system illegally at specific times. But if we look more closely, we'll see that there are anomalies in these logs. Leona pointed out discrepancies in the logs, deleted traces, altered lines of code, and mismatched timestamps. She presented irrefutable evidence showing that the logs had been tampered with. These pieces of evidence suggest that someone intentionally created false evidence to frame Marcus Allen, Leona said, her voice full of conviction. And I believe it is crucial that we find out who that person is. Leona Carter's testimony was like a bombshell detonating in the courtroom. Everyone sat stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Rachel Goldberg, sitting next to Marcus Allen, felt as if she had been given a second chance. She knew this was their only opportunity to prove Marcus's innocence. The room was thick with disbelief, and as Leona's words settled into the air, a newfound hope began to flicker in the hearts of those who had been fighting for the truth. The game had changed, and for the first time, the prosecution seemed vulnerable, their case unraveling before their eyes. Leona had not just shaken the foundation of the trial, she had shattered it entirely. Leona Carter's testimony had sent shock waves through the courtroom. Bradley Sanderson, the powerful and arrogant man, felt the ground beneath him begin to tremble. He knew that if he couldn't quench the flame of truth that Leona had ignited, his case would crumble into dust. You're trying to mislead the jury with baseless speculation, Bradley growled, his voice no longer maintaining its usual calm. Your analysis is nothing but cheap theatrics with no legal value. Mr. Sanderson, Leona responded, her voice still calm and surprisingly steady. I am not a magician. I'm just an ordinary woman trying to uncover the truth. And the truth is, the evidence you presented has been falsified. Bradley tried to undermine Leona's credibility by attacking her qualifications. He asked a barrage of pointed questions about her degrees, her experience, and the cases she had previously been involved in. He deliberately tried to belittle her, painting her as an amateur unqualified to make such profound analyses. Do you understand that the analyses you've presented could seriously harm national security? Bradley asked, his voice laced with threat. Do you realize you're playing with fire? I understand, Leona replied, her gaze unwavering. But I also know that the truth is more important than anything else. And I will not allow anyone to hide the truth, no matter how powerful they are. The battle of wits between Bradley and Leona was fierce, like a brutal, no-holds-barred boxing match. Every question, every answer, every glance, every gesture was charged with intense tension. Bradley tried to corner Leona, but she always found a way to counterattack. She was never scared or rattled, maintaining her composure, demonstrating her sharp mind and resolve. You're trying to protect a criminal, Bradley yelled, his voice accusing. You're trying to cover up the truth. I'm not protecting anyone, Leona retorted, her voice resolute. I'm protecting the truth. And the truth is, Marcus Allen is not a criminal. He is the victim of a dark conspiracy, one that you and your co-conspirators have carefully orchestrated. Leona's words reverberated through the courtroom like a declaration of war, a challenge. She was not only proving Marcus Allen's innocence, but she was also exposing the true face of Bradley Sanderson, a man willing to sacrifice justice to achieve his own ends. After the intense battle of wits, Leona Carter remained unshaken. She stepped up to the projector stand, a determined look on her face. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will present irrefutable evidence to prove that the system logs have been tampered with. Leona began to display enlarged images, carefully analyzed lines of code, and clear comparative graphs. She explained every detail in a coherent, accessible manner, like an expert guiding a class of students. "Here are the deleted traces," Leona said, pointing to a magnified image. "These traces show that someone deliberately erased crucial information that could prove Marcus Allen's innocence. And here are the lines of code that were altered," Leona continued, pointing to a segment of code. "These lines of code show that someone intentionally modified the content of the logs, creating false evidence to frame Marcus Allen. And here are the mismatched access times," Leona explained, indicating a comparative chart. "These access times show that someone fabricated these logs, creating a false narrative to hide the truth." Leona Carter's evidence was not just a series of analyses. It was tangible proof, undeniable evidence. She presented in-depth data analysis, images capturing traces of intrusions, and altered lines of code, all laid out clearly and methodically. Bradley Sanderson and the prosecution team found themselves cornered. They watched the evidence being displayed, irrefutable evidence, and they knew they had lost. Their confidence and arrogance evaporated, replaced by confusion and panic. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Everyone was stunned by the evidence Leona Carter had presented. Their eyes turned to Marcus Allen, sitting in the defendant's chair, his face illuminated with hope, his eyes filled with a newfound sense of possibility. They turned to Rachel Goldberg, sitting beside Marcus, her face glowing with pride and triumph. A wave of hope, excitement, and disbelief swept through the room. It was clear to everyone that Leona Carter's evidence had completely changed the course of the trial. The truth was slowly being revealed, and justice was beginning to take its rightful place. After Leona Carter's bombshell presentation of evidence, Bradley Sanderson felt as if the ground beneath him was crumbling. He knew that the irrefutable proof she had just laid out had destroyed all his efforts. But he wasn't the type to back down easily. He was determined to make one final play, a move that could change the outcome of the entire trial. With a deep breath, Bradley stood up, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the room. His voice, once calm and calculated, now had a sharp edge to it. "Your Honor," he began, his words ringing out through the courtroom, "I demand that this witness reveal her true identity. I want to know who she really is and why she is here." The request hung in the air like a challenge. The eyes of the courtroom shifted to Leona Carter, who had remained calm throughout the entire trial. Rachel Goldberg, sitting next to Marcus Allen, felt her heart race. A wave of worry washed over her. She knew that if Leona revealed her true identity, it could jeopardize everything. If the truth of Leona's role in the investigation were to be fully exposed, it could bring unforeseen consequences, both for Leona and for Marcus. But she also knew this was their only chance. If Leona's secret identity was revealed, it might not only validate her testimony, but also give them the final piece they needed to break through the prosecution's case. "Your Honor," Leona spoke up, her voice unwavering, calm as ever. "I have no reason to hide my identity. I am Leona Carter, and I am a special agent with the United States Secret Service." The words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. The room fell into an eerie silence as every person present tried to process what they had just heard. A ripple of shock ran through the jury, the attorneys, and the spectators alike. For a moment, it felt as if time had stopped. No one could believe what they were hearing. Bradley Sanderson, the prosecutor who had been so confident just moments before, seemed stunned. His eyes widened in disbelief, his face paling slightly as the realization set in. He had underestimated Leona. He had thought her just another witness, an observer, an outsider. But now she was revealed to be an active participant in the investigation, an agent from the Secret Service, a branch of the government with its own vast resources and authority. U.S. Secret Service agent? Bradley repeated, his voice faltering slightly as he tried to regain his composure. "Are you trying to mock us? You expect us to believe this?" His words dripped with skepticism, but there was an underlying hint of fear now that he hadn't anticipated. Leona's response was measured but filled with the weight of truth. "I'm not mocking anyone," she said firmly, her eyes steady and unwavering. "I am a special agent with the U.S. Secret Service, and I am conducting a classified investigation into a corruption ring that involves the defense contractor connected to this case. The bombshell dropped with an even louder impact, reverberating through the courtroom. Leona continued, outlining the scope of her investigation, connecting the dots that led to Marcus Allen's wrongful accusation. As she spoke, her words painted a picture of a vast conspiracy, one that extended far beyond Marcus's involvement. The logs had been fabricated, and Marcus Allen had been framed as part of a larger, more insidious scheme orchestrated by those with enough power and influence to cover their tracks. These pieces of evidence clearly show that someone within the system manipulated the records to falsely accuse Marcus Allen. Leona continued, her voice steady but with an edge of determination. I am here today because I believe it is our duty to uncover the truth, and I believe Marcus is not the criminal he's been made out to be. He's a victim of a far larger operation. As Leona's words sank in, the room seemed to shift. Marcus Allen, who had been sitting silently throughout the trial, looking like a man on the brink of despair, suddenly straightened up in his chair. His eyes, which had once been filled with fear and hopelessness, now glimmered with something different, hope. His face, once gaunt with the weight of the accusations, began to brighten with the promise of vindication. Rachel Goldberg, sitting beside him, could hardly believe what she was hearing. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. For the first time since the trial had begun, she felt a surge of triumph. Leona's revelation had shattered the prosecution's case. This wasn't just a legal win, it was a moral victory. Bradley Sanderson, on the other hand, looked as though the floor had been swept out from under him. His earlier arrogance had evaporated. He tried to regain control, but it was too late. The momentum had shifted. Leona had just delivered the knockout blow to his case, and he knew it. Leona Carter's revelation hit the courtroom like an explosion, tearing apart the tense atmosphere that had settled over the proceedings. Shock and confusion spread like wildfire, reflected on the faces of every person present. Whispers quickly spread through the room, murmurs of disbelief filling the air. All eyes turned toward Leona as if she were an alien creature that had suddenly appeared from another world. Reporters scrambled to take notes, their fingers flying across keyboards in an attempt to capture every detail. The audience, ranging from seasoned lawyers to ordinary citizens, sat in stunned silence, their mouths agape, unable to process what they had just heard. Marcus Allen, who had been sitting on the defendant's chair, felt as though he had just been freed from a nightmare. His face lit up, his eyes sparkled with hope, as though he had just glimpsed the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Rachel Goldberg, sitting next to him, felt a rush of triumph. She had fought this battle with everything she had, and now it seemed they were on the verge of victory. Her gaze turned toward Leona, filled with admiration and gratitude. But the most striking reaction came from Bradley Sanderson. The powerful and arrogant man who had once stood tall with unwavering confidence now appeared disoriented and rattled. His face flushed red, beads of sweat dotting his forehead. He glared at Leona, his eyes filled with suspicion and irritation. U.S. Secret Service agent? Bradley repeated, his voice trembling. Are you trying to mock us? I'm not mocking anyone, Leona responded, her voice unwavering, her stance firm. I am a special agent with the United States Secret Service, and I am conducting an investigation into a corruption ring involving a defense contractor connected to this case. Bradley's attempts to maintain his composure faltered. His usual air of control was slipping, and the unease in his eyes was evident. He knew that Leona's testimony could destroy his entire case. His gaze shifted toward his colleagues, who were now looking at him with doubt and disappointment. His once confident facade had crumbled, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. This is a conspiracy, Bradley spat, his voice laden with accusation. You're trying to cover up the truth. The truth is, Leona retorted, her voice filled with conviction. Marcus Allen is not a criminal. He is the victim of a dark conspiracy, one that you and your co-conspirators have carefully constructed. Leona's words resonated in the courtroom like a declaration of war, a challenge to everything Bradley had worked to build. Her testimony not only proved Marcus Allen's innocence, but it also exposed the true face of Bradley Sanderson, a man willing to sacrifice justice for his own ambitions. The courtroom was now filled with a mix of emotions. There was relief, disbelief, and the sharp sting of truth being revealed. Marcus Allen had been unjustly accused, and the evidence was undeniable. As the truth unfolded, the prosecution's case, once so carefully constructed, crumbled before everyone's eyes. Bradley Sanderson's power, once so absolute, was now in question, and the battle for justice was no longer his to win. The air in the room was thick with tension as the audience waited to see how Bradley would respond. Would he accept his defeat, or would he double down, trying to salvage whatever shred of credibility he had left? Regardless of what came next, one thing was certain. The trial had taken a decisive turn, and the truth had triumphed over the lies. The revelation of Leona Carter's true identity struck a fatal blow to the prosecution's case. The courtroom was engulfed in shock, confusion, and exhilaration. Everyone in the room understood that this was an irreversible turning point, one that would completely change the course of the trial. Bradley Sanderson, the once powerful and arrogant man, now appeared small and helpless. His face turned crimson. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead as he stared at Leona, his eyes filled with doubt and concern. He knew that Leona's testimony had obliterated all his efforts, exposing his true nature to the public. He turned to his colleagues, but their eyes reflected suspicion and disappointment. They couldn't believe that he had been involved in such a dark conspiracy, one that was now unraveling before them. The confidence that had defined him throughout the trial had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. Marcus Allen, sitting in the defendant's chair, felt as though he had been freed from a nightmare. His face lit up with a smile, his eyes sparkling with hope, as if he had just glimpsed the light at the end of a long, oppressive tunnel. Rachel Goldberg, sitting next to him, felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. The battle had been grueling, but now it seemed they were on the verge of victory. She looked at Leona, her eyes filled with admiration and gratitude. There was no longer any doubt. Truth had been revealed, and justice was beginning to be served. The dark secrets that had been buried for so long were coming to light. The guilty would have to pay the price. Marcus Allen, the innocent man who had been wrongfully accused, would soon be exonerated and set free. And Leona Carter, the mysterious woman, would become the quiet hero who had brought justice to a man who had been robbed of his freedom. As the weight of the moment settled over the room, the courtroom became aware of the enormity of the shift that had just occurred. No longer was the prosecution in control. The tide had turned, and nothing would be the same again. The truth had been revealed in its full force, and with it, the entire foundation of the case had been shattered. Bradley Sanderson's defeat was not just inevitable, it was now undeniable. The faces in the courtroom were no longer those of doubt, but of resolution. And as the truth echoed through the room, it became clear justice would be served, and the lies that had held Marcus Allen captive were finally being destroyed. After the shock wave of revealing her true identity, Leona Carter continued to shake the courtroom with a bombshell of an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Leona began, her voice steady and commanding. "I am conducting an ongoing investigation into a massive corruption ring involving a defense security contractor. This investigation has been underway for several months, and the evidence we've gathered points to a much larger conspiracy at play, one that involves high-ranking officials within our own government and military." Her words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap, and the atmosphere shifted. The entire room held its breath as Leona delved deeper into the details of her investigation. She spoke about a corrupt network siphoning off millions in public funds through fraudulent defense contracts. These contractors, she revealed, were involved in embezzlement, bribery, and the manipulation of vital national security projects. The gravity of her testimony was apparent. This wasn't just about Marcus Allen's case anymore. It was about a powerful and dangerous web of deceit threatening the security and integrity of the nation. Leona continued, describing how the corruption had reached the highest echelons of power. "I have uncovered evidence showing that these officials not only manipulated government contracts, but also used their positions to hide their own financial crimes, all while endangering the public trust in the security of our country," she explained, her voice unwavering. As Leona spoke, the room was flooded with an overwhelming sense of revelation. The investigation she was conducting wasn't just about a few bad actors. It was a coordinated conspiracy involving top military officials, government members, and those with the power to make or break national defense contracts. The corruption was vast, deeply rooted, and meticulously concealed, but Leona had managed to peel back the layers to expose the truth. To enhance the drama and urgency, Leona shared vivid flashbacks illustrating key moments from her investigation, each one revealing a piece of the puzzle that was slowly but surely coming together. In the first flashback, Leona and her team had been tracking a covert meeting between a high-ranking government official and a representative of the defense contractor. The conversation they recorded was chilling. They discussed how they would orchestrate the manipulation of a multi-million-dollar defense contract with the explicit goal of ensuring the contract would be awarded to a company tied to illicit financial interests. The meeting had been planned with secrecy, but the agents had anticipated it and managed to gather irrefutable proof. In the second flashback, Leona took a bold step to infiltrate one of the contractor's top-secret offices. What she found inside were classified documents that not only exposed the fraudulent contracts, but revealed the sheer scale of the embezzlement. Millions of dollars had been funneled out of the defense budget, disappearing into the pockets of individuals who had no regard for the safety of the nation, only their own wealth. As Leona pored over the documents, the evidence became undeniably clear. The entire system was rigged to benefit the corrupt elite, all while threatening the very security they were supposed to uphold. In the third flashback, a confidential whistleblower had provided crucial information to Leona. This individual had been working from the inside, gathering evidence on the corrupt activities. The whistleblower disclosed that there were people in positions of incredible power within both the government and the military who were working tirelessly to cover up the truth. They were willing to do whatever it took to maintain their grip on the illicit activities, including silencing anyone who posed a threat to their secrecy. Leona's source had already given her critical intel, but the source was also aware of the danger they faced in coming forward. Their information was invaluable, but the risks were life-threatening. These flashbacks weren't just dramatic revelations. They were a window into the extraordinary lengths Leona had gone to and the danger she had faced. She and her team had risked everything to uncover the truth. The investigation had required careful planning, constant vigilance, and the courage to confront one of the most powerful corrupt systems in the country. Through covert surveillance, secretive meetings, and breaking into high-security locations, Leona had unearthed the grim reality of the conspiracy that had poisoned the system. "The evidence is clear," Leona declared, her voice becoming firmer with every word. "Marcus Allen is not a criminal. He is a victim, a pawn in a much larger scheme designed by individuals who were desperate to cover their tracks. This entire setup was a deliberate effort to protect the criminals behind the fraud and manipulate the truth." The impact of Leona's testimony was profound. It didn't just clear Marcus's name. It tore the facade off an entire network of deceit. The trial had shifted irrevocably. No longer was it simply about proving Marcus Allen's innocence. It was now about exposing the deep-rooted corruption threatening the very foundation of national security. Leona's courage and persistence had uncovered something far larger, and the stakes had never been higher. The evidence presented by Leona Carter painted a clear and shocking picture. Marcus Allen was not a criminal, but rather a pawn in a dark and calculated conspiracy. He had been manipulated, framed, and wrongfully accused. He had been used as a scapegoat, the unfortunate individual who had to bear the sins of those who sought to conceal their own crimes. The altered lines of code, the deleted traces, the mismatched access times, each piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Someone had deliberately fabricated evidence to accuse Marcus. He had been turned into a sacrificial lamb, someone to carry the blame for the corrupt individuals who were trying to hide their criminal activities. As the evidence was laid out, Marcus felt a rush of anger swell within him. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. He couldn't fathom the depth of the deceit that had been directed at him. How could they be so ruthless? How could they make him the fall guy for their sins? "Why?" Marcus shouted, his voice full of rage. "Why did they do this to me? Why ruin my life like this?" His voice broke as the weight of the betrayal became overwhelming. His life, his reputation, everything he had worked for had been torn apart by those who had used him as a pawn in their game of power. The anger and disbelief surged within him, and for the first time, he truly understood the cruelty of the system that had wrongfully accused him. Rachel Goldberg, sitting beside Marcus, shared in his fury. She too felt the sting of injustice. But hers was a fury born from the desire for truth. She could not comprehend how those in power had twisted the law to serve their selfish needs, how they had destroyed an innocent life without any remorse. "This is a blatant injustice," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. "They've turned Marcus into a pawn, made him carry the guilt for their crimes. We will not let them get away with this. We will fight for justice, and we will make sure Marcus is exonerated." Marcus's and Rachel's anger was not only personal. It was a collective rage that came from the core of those who believed in justice, those who could not stand to see it trampled upon. They had witnessed firsthand how power and corruption could crush the innocent, but now, with the truth finally coming to light, they knew they couldn't back down. They would fight not just for Marcus's innocence, but to expose the corrupt system that had made him its victim. The courtroom, charged with their fury, was now a battleground for justice, and Marcus, once a helpless victim of a ruthless conspiracy, was no longer just a man fighting for his life. He had become a symbol of the fight against corruption, a symbol of resilience against those who believe they could control the truth. With a burning desire to right the wrongs done to him, Marcus was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. He had become a player in his own right, ready to expose the corruption that had nearly cost him everything. And with Rachel by his side, they would make sure that the truth came out, no matter the cost. The evidence presented by Leona Carter had caused an earthquake in the courtroom. Bradley Sanderson and his co-conspirators felt as if they were falling into an endless abyss. They knew that their dark secrets were slowly being exposed, and they would have to pay for their actions. Bradley Sanderson, the powerful and arrogant man who had once held the reins of the courtroom, now appeared small and powerless. His face flushed a deep red, beads of sweat trickling down his forehead. He stared at Leona Carter, his eyes full of doubt and anxiety. He knew she held evidence that could destroy his career, his reputation, and everything he had worked for. "What are you trying to do?" Bradley growled, his voice shaking. "Are you trying to ruin my life?" "I'm not ruining anyone's life," Leona responded firmly. "I am simply seeking the truth. And the truth is, you and those involved have turned Marcus Allen into a pawn, someone who would take the fall for your wrongdoings." Bradley's associates too felt the weight of fear and uncertainty creeping in. They could feel the walls closing in, knowing that they couldn't escape the truth. They glanced at Bradley, their eyes filled with doubt and disappointment. The loyalty they had once felt toward him seemed to wane as they realized they had been manipulated, used as mere tools in a larger, much darker game. The dark secrets were gradually being uncovered, and the cunning plots that had been hidden in the shadows were slowly being exposed. The corrupt individuals, those who had exploited their power for personal gain, now found themselves facing the collapse of their empire. They felt trapped, cornered, with no way out. The fear was palpable, a tangible presence in the room. The entire courtroom was filled with anger, outrage, and an escalating sense of tension. Everyone could feel the injustice that Marcus Allen had endured, and it sparked a fire of righteous indignation. The greed and cruelty of the corrupt officials stoked the flames of hatred. There was a palpable sense of drama, a tragic realization that the dark secrets that had been buried for so long were finally being brought to light. The corrupt would pay for their actions. Justice would be served. And Marcus Allen, the innocent man who had been unjustly accused, would be vindicated. The trial had reached its boiling point. The walls of corruption were crumbling, piece by piece. For Bradley and his associates, the hour of reckoning had come, and there was no escaping the consequences of their actions. The courtroom, filled with emotion and anticipation, was now the stage for the final showdown where truth would triumph and justice would prevail. In the tense atmosphere that filled the courtroom, Rachel Goldberg and Leona Carter moved in perfect synchrony, like two pieces of a puzzle fitting together. They knew this was the decisive moment, the moment when they had to present irrefutable evidence exposing the crimes of the corrupt individuals responsible for Marcus Allen's wrongful accusation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Rachel Goldberg began, her voice firm and resolute. "We will present the final pieces of evidence, evidence that will prove Marcus Allen is the victim of a dark conspiracy." Leona Carter stepped up to the projector stand, her face set with determination. She began displaying images, lines of code, and classified documents, all meticulously arranged in a logical and methodical manner. "These are the original system logs," Leona said, pointing to a magnified image on the screen. "These logs show that Marcus Allen never accessed the system illegally. The traces presented by the prosecution have been fabricated. And here are the classified documents," Leona continued, pointing to a document stamped with a red seal. "These documents reveal the existence of a corruption ring tied to a defense security contractor. This ring has embezzled millions of dollars from defense contracts. And here are the lines of code," Leona said, pointing to a complex segment of code. "These lines show that someone intentionally altered the content of the logs, creating false evidence to frame Marcus Allen." The evidence presented by Rachel and Leona wasn't just theoretical. It was tangible, irrefutable proof. They presented in-depth analysis of data, images capturing traces of intrusion, lines of code that had been altered, and classified documents, all laid out in a clear, coherent manner. Bradley Sanderson and his co-conspirators felt as though they were being backed into a corner. They watched as the irrefutable evidence was presented, each piece of it reinforcing the fact that their case was crumbling. They knew that they had lost. The confidence and arrogance that had once marked their every move evaporated, replaced by confusion and panic. An oppressive silence took over the courtroom. Everyone was stunned by the evidence Rachel and Leona had just revealed. The jury, the attorneys, the onlookers, each of them was processing the magnitude of what had just unfolded. They looked at Marcus Allen, who sat in the defendant's chair, his face glowing with a sense of relief, his eyes now full of hope. They looked at Rachel Goldberg and Leona Carter, the courageous women who had fought tirelessly to bring justice to an innocent man. In that moment, the courtroom was filled with a collective understanding. The truth had been laid bare, the conspiracy exposed, and the path to justice was now clear. Marcus Allen, once shackled by the lies that had imprisoned him, was now on the brink of his freedom. The battle had been long, but in this final moment, justice had triumphed. The undeniable evidence presented by Rachel Goldberg and Leona Carter delivered a devastating blow to Bradley Sanderson and his co-conspirators. There was no escaping the truth anymore. Their true faces had been exposed before the entire courtroom and before the public who had been watching with bated breath. Bradley Sanderson, the once powerful and arrogant man, now appeared small and powerless. He had been revealed as the mastermind behind the corruption ring, the one who had used his power for personal gain. He hadn't just betrayed justice. He had betrayed the trust of those who had believed in him. His reputation, built on a facade of control and authority, was now nothing more than a crumbled heap of lies. The other key players in the corruption ring were also apprehended. Government officials, security contractor representatives, each one of them had to bow their heads before the law. Justice had been served, and those who had abused their power for personal benefit were now facing the consequences of their actions. The system that had once allowed them to thrive had now turned against them, leaving them powerless and exposed. After days of intense deliberation, the jury finally delivered its verdict. Marcus Allen was innocent. The courtroom erupted in applause and cheers. Marcus Allen, the innocent man, had been exonerated. For Marcus, it felt as though an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He looked at Rachel Goldberg and Leona Carter, the brave women who had fought tirelessly to bring justice to him. Words failed him. All he could do was let tears of joy stream down his face, tears that had been held back for so long. Rachel Goldberg felt a rush of happiness and fulfillment wash over her. She had won a hard-fought battle, had reclaimed justice for an innocent man. Her eyes met Marcus's, filled with pride and joy. She had done what many would have deemed impossible, and now she could finally see the fruits of her labor. Justice had been restored. Leona Carter felt a sense of relief and satisfaction settle in her heart. She had completed her mission. She had uncovered the true faces of the corrupt and brought justice to a man wrongfully accused. Her gaze lingered on Marcus and Rachel, her eyes warm and sincere, knowing that the road ahead had been worth the struggle. The courtroom was enveloped in an atmosphere of deep emotion. People felt happiness, satisfaction, and relief. The truth had triumphed. Justice had been delivered. The corrupt had paid the price for their actions, and Marcus Allen, the innocent man, had been exonerated and freed. For Marcus, it wasn't just about the verdict. It was about the realization that his life, his dignity, and his freedom had been restored. The years of torment, the wrongful accusations had come to an end, and he could finally breathe freely again. The courtroom was filled with a sense of justice being done, and as the gavel fell, there was no doubt in anyone's mind. This was a victory for truth and a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, could escape the consequences of their actions. Marcus Allen's journey to justice had been long and painful, but in the end, it was a triumph of the human spirit, resilience, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that the truth will always prevail. The case of Marcus Allen quickly became a focal point for public attention. Media outlets covered it extensively, with newspapers, TV channels, and social media platforms overflowing with articles, reports, and comments on the trial. Across the nation, people expressed their outrage at the injustice Marcus had suffered and shared admiration for the courage and perseverance displayed by Rachel Goldberg and Leona Carter. Legal experts, social activists, and public figures spoke out, offering analysis of the case and sharing lessons about truth, justice, and bravery. They emphasized that this case served as a warning to those involved in corruption, those who exploit power for personal gain, and underscored that justice still existed and that brave individuals would always prevail. The story of Marcus Allen wasn't just about an innocent man being exonerated. It was also a powerful narrative about the strength of truth, the value of justice, and the courage of those who dare to stand up against evil. It carried a deep humanitarian message, reigniting faith in the goodness of humanity and the potential for righteousness to triumph, no matter the odds. Leona Carter, the mysterious woman, had become a symbol of the silent hero. She was uninterested in fame or recognition, focusing solely on her work, seeking the truth, and bringing justice to an innocent man. She was living proof that heroes don't always appear on grand stages. Sometimes they are ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, but their actions are extraordinary. Reflecting on heroes like Leona, we realize that they are often those who quietly dedicate themselves to fighting for justice, who protect the values that define society, and who work behind the scenes to create meaningful change. They are the unsung heroes who wield extraordinary power, capable of transforming lives through their unwavering commitment to truth. The trial of Marcus Allen had concluded, but the echoes of it still resonated. The corrupt officials had been exposed, but others remained in the shadows, continuing their unlawful activities. Leona Carter resumed her investigation, tirelessly searching for the masterminds behind the corruption ring. Rachel Goldberg continued her fight for justice, defending the vulnerable and ensuring that the light of fairness would always shine. Marcus Allen began a new chapter of his life, one filled with freedom and happiness. The open-ended conclusion of the story hints at the continuing battle against corruption, suggesting that there are still more perpetrators to be uncovered. It invites reflection, encouraging readers to think about the ongoing struggle for justice. The story leaves a lingering thought in the minds of the readers, making them contemplate the deeper truth of the world around them. The emotional response from the readers after finishing the story is one of reflection, inspiration, and hope. They reflect on the lessons of truth, justice, and courage. They are moved by the stories of individuals who faced adversity with integrity, and they are left with hope that justice will always prevail, that silent heroes will always emerge, and that good will continue to exist in the world, even in the face of darkness. The story of Marcus Allen, Rachel Goldberg, and Leona Carter is not just a fictional tale, but also a profound life lesson. It reminds us that truth and justice will always prevail, no matter how many challenges and trials one must endure. It also shows us that every individual has the power to change their own life and the lives of others, as long as we have enough courage and perseverance. In today's world, we can apply these lessons by always trusting in the truth, fighting for justice, and becoming silent heroes. Even when the truth is concealed by lies and conspiracies, it still exists. We must always seek the truth and never give up on believing in it. When we witness injustice, we should not remain silent. Speak up, stand up for the vulnerable, and fight for a fairer society. You don't have to be a superhero to change the world. All it takes is kindness, sincerity, and a sense of responsibility to become a silent hero, bringing goodness into life. Remember, if you are inspired by stories with unexpected twists, moral challenges, and the impact of kindness, please support us by liking or subscribing to Emotional Journey. We put our heart and soul into each story, and it really means a lot to have you come along for the ride. Thank you for being a part of this journey.